Well, welcome everyone. Thank you for joining us for our second CChats panel of 2021. This quarter, we've got something that we're pretty excited to talk about, which is a little bit of an exploration of the profession of coaching here in Ireland, and really kind of exploring a little bit of its impact on business and society, both in its current form and also in terms of like the potential impact that maybe we could make as a community of practice. Maybe to frame things up a little bit, we'd see coaching as a pretty rapidly growing industry, but it's a space where you might not really get an accurate definition, depending on who you ask, of what it really means to be a coach. And while there are a number of accreditation bodies that exist, coaching isn't necessarily regulated in the same way that a lot of other fields are, such as counseling or psychotherapy. And while most coaches would probably say that they do what they do to help others become better versions of themselves, I think there's an underlying question there we have to ask of like, how do we define better? Are we as coaches really helping to improve the lives of others and the world around us? Are we having a different impact? Looking at what's happened over the last year with the pandemic and how things have really kind of shaken a lot of assumptions that we have about the world. There have been times, I think, where we've asked ourselves, does the nature of our work, which oftentimes ends up being somewhat elite, working with clients who often already have some form of privilege, are we actually preserving or reinforcing systemic issues, or are we helping people to think differently about things and bring about some more substantial change? And how do we as coaches kind of hold in high regard the level of trust, influence, and inspiration that we might bring into our engagements with clients, while still maintaining some distance and not being too directorial in our work, which is obviously one of the things that tends to set coaching apart from other things. We don't really tell people what to do. We just ask a lot of questions and try to help them explore maybe what the right answer for them is. So in this panel, we want to speak with a few people who come at this from a few different angles, who inspire us with the work that they do as coaches themselves or as developers of other coaches. And we want to gain some insights into how they're considering some of these pressing questions themselves. So I think to kick us off, maybe we'll just do some quick introductions, and how about we just go in alphabetical order by first names. So Beth, let's start with you. Wouldn't mind telling us a little bit about yourself and what you do?
Sure. My name is Beth Lee. I am a psychological coach. I'm a trainer, I'm a writer, and I'm a researcher. I kind of wear a whole mess of different hats. A little bit about me. I'm originally from the States. I haven't actually lived in the States for the past 15 years. I've lived in 5 other countries and have been running around trying to find home, and have finally found it here in Dublin, in Ireland. So I'm here, but I spent the last 6 years in the UK, and that's where I got my certification. And that's also where I actually diverted or pivoted, which is, I think, the word at the moment, out of my corporate career into the coaching world, or into looking the psychology side of things, where I gained a degree, a master's in psychology and neuroscience of mental health. That was due to a personal experience having me shift. And from there, getting the education was fantastic, except that I didn't know what to do with it. And so it kind of only made sense to go look at coaching as a methodology, really, to figure out, how do I apply this information that I just spent 4 years getting, which was phenomenal. So that's what I did. I went and became a certified psychological coach. I did that for a couple of years. I'm still doing that. I have a very niche audience. I work specifically with expat mums, because those are my people. And I work with just some other students. I've done work with some students at a university a college in London. So those are my target markets. So I'm now here in Dublin. I've only just moved here last August, in the middle of the pandemic. So I have probably a unique experience here that hopefully I can offer and help out with.
Fantastic. Thanks for joining us today, Beth.
Yes, you're very welcome.
Yeah. Cathie, how about yourself?
Hi, everyone. So my name is Cathie Owens. I've spent the last 16 years working at Google. So I started in Google in Dublin on the ad sales team. And then after a couple of years, moved to Sydney, Australia for a year, didn't come home for 8 years. Loved it too much. But while I was there, I was a sales manager, and I was naturally gravitated towards the people development aspect of my role. So I followed that curiosity and passion into the people development space. So I was a regional and global business partner in L&D, so partnering with HR and our VPs globally across multiple organizations on their talent development needs. Moved back to Dublin about 6 years ago with my family, my first child, and then had the opportunity to step into a newly forming team, so a global team working enterprise-wide, so made up of coaches and OD consultants. So we worked across the whole company, primarily on org design, leadership and team effectiveness, and change management engagements. But where I find myself today is I have very recently made the decision to step out of Google. So, you know, I'm taking the time to reflect on my journey, recharge the batteries after 16 years, and slowly build my coaching and consulting practice. So I feel like I'm not new to coaching at all, but very new to the industry. So hopefully I can bring kind of an internal corporate perspective today and kind of what I've kind of observed as I'm stepping into this new world. But I'm thrilled to be here and I can't wait to learn from you all today.
You're so very welcome. Thank you for joining us today.
Yeah, we thought your perspectives from that long in an organization like that would bring some real color to the conversation. And as someone who was in an organization like that for a long time myself, good call on the recharge of the batteries.
So important.
Yeah. Paula, how about you?
So first of all, thank you so much for having me.
Our
This
pleasure.
fabulous company. Thank you so much. And to talk about a subject I'm so passionate about. And you can feel that sense of change, even as Cathie and Beth were talking there. There's that sense of change, which is wonderful. So my name is Paulie King. I am the director of an organisation called Kingstown College. Set up in 2004. Prior to that, I was a director in a number of European projects. So I suppose I bring that understanding of the challenges of leadership. And obviously heading up, working with the college, I'm heading up the academic side. So I also work one-to-one as an executive coach, and I lecture in the space of coaching. And it has been such an interesting journey, really has. And I would say that we've all felt that. I used to say I'm involved in coaching for approximately 17 years. My son is 25 years old, and he said, "Mom, you are telling lies." So I'm involved in coaching for over 25 years. And I have seen amazing shifts and changes in the space of coaching, as I think we all have experienced. I mean, if you think even what Cathie was saying there are, I would say, very few organizations who haven't embraced the whole message of coaching. And the reason for that is it's that space of taking ownership of our lives and understanding that our self-narrative is really important, and we are the narrators of our own lives, which is really, really important message. I loved what Beth said. I have a huge passion, Beth, for mental health and well-being and corporate coaching. I was part of the group who set up our own diploma in mental health and well-being and in corporate coaching. And even today, I have to be honest, I've had 2 clients who are hitting burnout, and it's a serious space and a place I'm passionate about. I want to say one thing before I pass over to you, Stephen, is there is a sense that counselling and psychotherapy are regulated and coaching isn't. That's a myth. Counselling and psychotherapy are not regulated. That's an important one to say, because they do exactly what we do in our coaching. They are aligned to professional organisations who monitor the work they do. So we are in the exact same space in the coaching profession, and we are equally, as counselling and psychotherapy is, we are equally going forward and looking at that space of regulation. But there's amazing work being done in this space. So thank you for having me.
Oh, thank you, Paula, and thanks for correcting what I stated there at the beginning. So, Stephen. By the way, actually, we would know Paula ourselves from Kingstown College. That was where we got our first coaching certification. So we're really pleased you could join us today. So
yes, thank you.
Sorry, Stephen. Let's hear a little bit from you.
Yeah, so Stephen McDonald, Timesworth is the company, and there's a lot of what's been said by the guys on the call as well are actually aligned with what the journey I've gone through as well. Similar to Cathie, I stepped away from a career after 17 years, took that bit of time, set up on my own as well, managed a diverse team, but it's diverse in skills. So it was extreme technical skills, there was customer care skills, legal skills, and admin skills in there as well. So actually managing a team and actually helping people to achieve what they can achieve through different routes was it's what I really enjoyed about the job. It was the opportunity to actually see people grow. I'm very much, and I've identified it, I'm comfortable with it. I'm very much a back of house person. I'm the person to raise that other person and give them the opportunity to move forward and to step up. Yeah, emotional intelligence is a big bag of mine. Habits are an area that I focus on, as many of you will know. And language is something that I'm really picking up a lot at the moment. It's something that I'm finding quite funny. Because again, and Paul, you're bang on. Like, coaching is a very interesting area where it's finding itself at the moment in relation to where it sits. One of the things I'm enjoying, and I actually get a smile from it, is the amount of people in the coaching areas who use the phrase, "I help people." And the gas part is, by the tenet of coaching, we're not actually helping, we're providing the opportunity and the space for people to help themselves. And I love kind of catching that and kind of getting curious. And actually, well, why do you help people? If you're coaching, you don't help, you provide space. And it's that opportunity to, I'm going to use it, I didn't say I promise I try to keep it out of it, but the Alice in Wonderland quote, I've used it 4 times this week. It's curiouser and curiouser. And I think that just really kind of gets it. And it's the way that quote kind of brings it. And she lost herself and the good English. That's where coaching really, in what I love doing, is that curiouser and curiouser. People lose themselves in that illusion they hold of themselves, and actually then see what opportunity there is as a result of it. So, and that's the reason why I love doing what I do.
Brilliant.
Excellent. Yes. And welcome everyone. I think we are so pleased to have all of you here, and the diversity of your backgrounds, although the similar journeys, is really what I think kind of comes from my point of view of coaching here in Ireland and my experience in the States, is that curiouser and curiouser phrase or quote is such the seed of coaching. And as you know, we've been coaching here in Ireland for quite a few years now. It has been changing, and the perception of coaching has been changing. And I'm very curious as to your opinions or impressions of that perception of coaching here in Ireland.
If I might be so bold, I'd love to hear Paula's view on this. Paula, you mentioned you've been coaching for 25 years and you've seen quite a shift over time. What's that look like?
Sure, and my work now, Jeff, is quite international, for the very reason that Ireland attracts multinationals. Cathie would know this. So we have a lot of multinationals based in Ireland too, and people might leave and go back to live in their own countries. So it's an interesting experience for me, and I'm working with a number of organizations internationally as well. So I have been watching the scene in Ireland and thinking, are we okay? Are we doing as well as, say, the States? Or we're doing so well. I genuinely believe this. The organizations I work with are extraordinarily ethical. I know years ago, I think everybody would agree with me, a lot of people call themselves coaches, because when something is growing and developing and is becoming a recognized space to be in, a lot of people are attracted to it. Now there's so many intelligent people in organizations. If you're going to go in and work in an organization, they will ask you a number of questions. They will say, are you trained? Let's just talk about training. They will say, are you trained, and who are you trained by? And are they recognized internationally? That's the first question they want to know. They will ask you if you're in supervision. Second question they want to know. They'll ask about your CPD. What is your CPD, and what do you do to make sure that you are ethical? Now, they're really important questions, and they would ask you if you're a member of a professional organization. And the European Mentoring and Coaching Council and the International Coach Federation are the two really who are the most recognized now. So the organization I'm working with are not just, and this is a really interesting shift that's only happened recently, they're not just now leading out on delivering coaching and mentoring programs. What they're doing is looking at getting their programs recognized internationally, which is a whole new shift. So they've been doing fantastic work up until now. I'm working with organizations now who are looking at getting the international standards for coaching and mentoring. I mean, that's fantastic, but very hard to get through the net now and be a successful coach. And I think you'll all agree with me, if you're not trained, if you're not signed up to an ethical organization, if you're not in supervision, and if you're not looking after your own CPT. So I personally believe, from the organization I work with, I mean, nothing is perfect and nothing is nirvana, but we are doing well in Ireland, in my belief system.
Oh, that's great.
Great.
Nice. Good to hear.
Yeah.
I suppose I would have suspected, you know, I mean, we've lived here for just 13 years ourselves, and some of my first interactions when I moved over and spoke with people about, you know, maybe we should get some coaching for this person, there was often a bit of shock and surprise, and it was kind of like, well, they're not a remedial case. And do you think that's a misconception that a lot of people still have about coaching, or do you feel like that's actually starting to shift in a healthy way as well?
I think it's starting to shift, but it's still there.
Yeah.
You're still getting calls and organizations asking you to come in and quote for doing a coaching program, and then they're looking for certain information outside of the confidentiality that you would hold in a coaching session, and they're looking for outcomes, which is different to what you would sign up to within a coaching program in itself. So again, a part of it comes from, and I think Paula hit the nail on the head. There are opportunists who will occupy that space, but the important part for all of us, and it's something I hold very, very high, is a code of ethics, and having the ethical and the moral compass to say no to those engagements, and to educate the organizations to actually, you know what, you're not looking for a coach. It's not your coach you need a HR specialist. And then giving them a signpost towards that HR specialist. But it's still there. And I would say, just based on calls I've had in the last kind of 3 or 4 months in that space, it's more Indigenous companies that would have that understanding more so than the multinationals, because they haven't been exposed to what actually coaching is and what coaching can bring and what coaching potential delivers to the company as well.
Sorry, Beth, were you trying to jump in there a moment ago as well?
Yeah, I was. I always like to try to interrupt Stephen.
It's fun. It's a little game we all play on Friday afternoons. So.
Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt. But you're spot on, Stephen, because I find that I have to actually give the education between the difference between a coach, you know, a trainer, a facilitator, and in my case, a counselor versus a therapist versus, you know, I'm a psychological coach, and I work differently than a counselor and a therapist or even a mentor. So I find that that's where, at least for those clients that are new to coaching, in a sense, I have to just explain, well, what exactly are you looking for? Can we go through what everything is so that I can make sure it's either me or it's somebody else?
Well, one of the things, and to come back on you, Beth, which is a great visual that I use, and it's from Michelle O'Sullivan. I'm not going to claim it myself, and it's just educating people the difference between coaching and mentoring. And it's just, look, coaching, it's getting into a taxi, you tell the driver where you want to go, and mentoring is getting onto a bus. There's a journey, there's a destination, but you don't get to pick where it is. And it's a nice way of actually getting people to think and recognize there is a difference between the two, although they may see them quite similar.
Yeah.
And I do the same actually on the psychological side of things. You know, I'm not a therapist. The therapist looks backward. A therapist helps you with issues backwards, and I'm actually forward thinking and moving forward. So it's that, I like that analogy. It's a good one.
I would offer that, you know, from, obviously I'm coming from a very big corporation, right? And with a lot of resources, and I'm sure you've all worked with many companies like it. But I've seen a massive kind of shift in the last 10 years, really around the attitudes towards coaching and the value that's placed on it. Really, really positive shift in the space. But I think you're all right. I think the education piece is still key. Even though we've made great strides, there still is the reinforcement of that message that's needed. And you will always get requests from people who are looking for the shot in the arm and the quick fix. And, you really need to, step back into that message and reinforce it. But I would say that what I've seen over the years is what used to be, there's something that we need to fix here. Let's call in the coach to kind of help with this situation, and to it being a very valued tool that is recognized as something that can help kind of in a multitude of situations. So yeah, but I think there's still work to be done in that space.
Yeah,
it's really interesting listening to you, because I love what you're saying and I don't disagree with you. However, I think the word education is what we're all using with organizations, and I think organizations, they're so diverse, because some organizations have really, really embraced a coaching and mentoring culture, and they're really educated and they really do know. And we very rarely get our immediate phone call from those organizations, because they know who we are. I think listening to us all, what we're saying is it's the organization that we're a bit younger in the road of coaching, maybe. Because I think really the organizations who have embraced the coaching and mentoring culture, people are aching to have a coach. Yeah. It's an honor. You have your chemistry meetings with 3 or 4 coaches, and you're delighted to meet them, and it's wonderful. And I think that's because the organization is, and I totally agree with you all, the organization is educated. So it's a very important differential, I think. Yeah, for sure. Yeah.
Stephen raised something that I thought that was an interesting point, which was this notion of like engaging in a coaching relationship and expecting specific outcomes, or this, return on investment type of discussion that you often get into with, corporate clients or business folks, because, at the end of the day, it comes down to money a lot of times. I'm curious, maybe Cathie, I'd love to hear your view on this. How would organizations like Google think about this? Because it as Stephen says, it's not always going to be something that delivers a direct outcome. Would you think about it in terms of ROI, or would you think about it a little bit differently?
Yeah, I think it really goes back to, a couple of people have said it, is like, how are the corporations defining coaching? And coaching happens across coaching as it's defined by the corporation. It happens across so many different places in the organization, and what it's being used for, what is it serving. I think when I think back to where we started with coaching at Google, it was, I'm trying to think what they called the program at the time. I think it was coaching for business results, and there were very clear outcomes that were going to be resulting from that. But whenever over time, as we've gone through this coaching journey in the organization, there is a recognition that, at the leadership and executive level, that's not the conversation that you're having. But it does depend, and it really comes back to that definition of coaching. What are we actually doing here? Is it coaching, or is it something else? But absolutely, there is a strong drive towards return on investment and outcomes in certain areas.
And even if I can layer on that, and it's not coaching, but it's on a similar topic. I'm looking at let's say Lean Six Sigma and the Green Belt. Mm-hmm. And you can say to somebody, I've Lean Six Sigma Green Belt, but there's that level 5, 6, or 7. There's very different outcomes and requirements of it. In the same way, there's a lot of kind of requests for coaching outcomes or coaching to be included, but it's not necessarily coaching. Yeah. It's coaching flavors and coaching elements, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I would agree. Actually, Stephen, I think it's along those same lines, or thinking in that same realm. I use coaching methodologies. When I teach, and when I went in to speak and teach, the students in London, my approach was a coaching approach. But is that an active listening approach? Sure. Could we name it something else? Sure. But, using the term, it's a coaching approach. at least then I get to educate a little bit about, the types of things that I'll do. I'll have active listening, I guide, I don't, I'll ask lots of questions, I'm very curious, all of that. But at least that when I was in teaching with the students, the environment there allowed me to use a methodology in a sense that I was taught, so that I could almost pass that same type of methodology and thinking down to the kids. Well, have you asked yourself this? Have you asked yourself that? So there's that other component, I guess, of transfer of methodologies, I guess is the right word, or process.
I was thinking kind of the same thing there, listening to Cathie and Stephen as well, because you can show up in very different ways as a coach. You could be someone who is really, performance focused. I'm going to help you sell more, developmental focused in terms of increasing capabilities. There are, transformational coaches, more holistic or sustainable kind of approach. I suppose I'm curious, like, for those of you who are actively coaching, have you found that you've even had a bit of a journey through what that's looked like, and maybe you started in one place and kind of ended up in another one?
I'm going to be cheeky and I'm going to answer this, but I'm going to be looking at Paula's face smile as I do. And I think that when you qualify, when you do your training, you come out and you coach, and it's quite formulaic. But it's when you build up that experience, build up those hours, get your accreditation, get that confidence, get that experience, absolutely change. And if you don't, there's something wrong. You're not looking back at what you're doing. You're not reviewing your session, not reviewing your potential for improvement the whole time. And it's like I coach in a very different way than I did a year ago.
What do you think? What is it that's pushed you? Has it been just reflection on your own practice, or has it actually been something more along the lines of like what I've felt, which is sort of this feeling of, I got into this, and again, we can go back to picking apart to help people or to expand their own thinking or whatever you want to call it. But for me, after a while, I got to the point where I was realizing, actually, I'm not sure I'm contributing to what I want to contribute to, because I'm helping people, or I'm enabling them in some way, but they're often the folks who already have access to a lot of great stuff, great resources, training, other folks around them. What about the other folks who can't afford to pay what I would charge them for an executive coaching session? What's happening to that part of the world that I'm leaving behind? I guess, was your change sort of purposeful in sort of what I described there, or was it more just kind of evolutionary, perhaps?
It was purposefully evolutionary.
You can say both as an option.
So like I keep a log of all my sessions. A part of what I would log in there is, what do I want to improve? How will I do it, and how will I know it's done? And that feeds into my CPD, and that allows me then to develop on that basis that my skills and my experience is going to make me a better coach, because I'm identifying through what I see and coach feedback and triad feedback of other people observing what's good, what needs to be improved, and what I can do. And my supervision feeds a lot into that as well. I suppose another part of it that feeds in is self-critic, the inner voice of wanting to be better at what I do. I suppose the third leg of that stool is I would see coaching skills kind of in a triangle. So you have a lot of people in the bottom area kind of fighting for work and for clients and for stuff that's going on. I don't want to be, and I don't see myself in that space. So to become in the middle or top of the triangle, and I'm chasing you, Paula, but I'm not up there yet. But again, if I want to go there, I have to be deliberate, and that's a conscious decision to step out of the formulaic and to step into the curiosity, the space where the coach can find the session as unveiling and sometimes uncomfortable as the client, but holding that space for the client and for the session.
Well, I think you said something really important, Stephen. And I think we all agree with this. I mean, I always say this, The day somebody comes to me and says, oh my God, Paul, I've cracked it. I've cracked it. I'm brilliant now. I'm a great coach. I would definitely be saying, stop. So stop, don't coach anymore. But you said something really important. We are evolving all the time, Steve, aren't we? You know, the reflective practice space is vital for us all. Of course it is. And you know, the growth. And young coaches, to be fair, maybe are a bit more formulaic. They're trained, you know, they've got the process, they're managing it well, they're probably really still very good, bringing really good value. As we mature, definitely maturing, I think, but as we mature, we're more present probably, you know, we're very, very there with the client. We're in flow. I think that's really what happens to us. We're totally in flow. The paradox is we still have to manage the process to allow our clients to manage the content. So wait, that's the kind of paradox below for sure.
I sort of had a similar experience. You know, it was about 3 years ago or so when I received my certification, and I, like you, Stephen, sort of went through the whole process. I went through supervision, I understood it. It was great. And I actually found that I prefer to engage with the content versus engaging with the client, not the client itself, but the client's engagement with the content. So it's a different way of looking at it. I like that content and helping a client learn, like the light bulb go off and go, oh, I didn't know that. Oh, let me try that. Like that to me is more a delivery of education. And I think it's because I saw it in the students. You know, when you see a student go, oh, I never thought to ask that question, then you go, ah, good. So I've actually taken a step back. I do only coach expat mums now because those are my people and I get them. I'm one of them. But for me, it is very much about the content of mental health, and you know exactly what I'm there to help with whether that's mental health, psychology, neuroscience, you know, all of those pieces to help to give us better wellness, well-being, you know, mental well-being. So my journey has actually understood fully what that coaching process is, and it's hard. It's not easy, and I think there's a certain type of person really that can give themselves to be such a good coach like Stephen does, to take a step back and to reflect. And it's a lot of hard work. And you know, I don't know what kids, you know, students coming out of the coaching academies or any of them sort of feel, but like Paula just said, with, you know, age, I can't go there. I want to go this direction.
It's so interesting listening to all of you. I suppose as I step into the industry, you know, having come from probably what's been like a bubble for 16 years, it's my experience. You know, I'm just having coffees and having chats with people at this stage, and Nindy has given me a lot of her time, which has been greatly appreciated. But one thing that I have noticed and that I'm feeling is, I suppose, a couple of things. Like there's so much energy around coaching, which, not that I didn't know it, but maybe it was a little unexpected. You know, I did like how much energy there is around it. I felt it at Google, but maybe part of me thought that because it's a multinational or whatever, but definitely in the Irish market, there's a lot of energy. But on the flip side of that, that's a little overwhelming, and it's noisy, and it's, you know, and I'm trying to pick through kind of what's the path forward. So like you're saying, Stephen, like how, you know, how do I reflect on my own practice? How's that going to help me find my way forward? And it's like you were saying, Beth, as well, I kind of have my people, right? So I think mums in transition are kind of where I gravitate to, and my profile seems to attract people in those kind of positions. But I suppose it's it's been kind of eye-opening. It's exciting. It's also a little intimidating. And I think one of the things that I reflected on kind of the last couple of years at Google, and I'm noticing now, is the specialism kind of part of it. So, and what does that mean? I think, Beth, you just said like there's a teach piece to that as well, and that's okay. So I've seen a great appetite for that at Google over the last couple of years, and I think obviously the pandemic has brought up a lot of desire for well-being coaches, resilience coaches, like, you know, that kind of thing. So that's just been quite interesting for me to observe.
Yeah, that's a really good point about the amount of energy here in Ireland towards coaching and some of the noise that that creates. And, you know, we were talking earlier about some of these organizations that accredit coaches, such as, you know, EMCC and ICF and many others. And, you know, sometimes even when I'm talking to potential clients, their eyes kind of glass over when I talk about, you know, where I'm accredited, and, you know, even when I got training, and they know that they're going to go Google it as soon as we're done talking to figure out if this is reputable and if there are a code of ethics involved, and, you know, is there supervision required? And, you know, I kind of wonder, like, is there a way, or is a need to really uplift these accreditation organizations so that, or is this just more education that coaches need to do who are accredited to make it aware that there are organizations out there that are looking for these international standards and trying to, in some ways, make sure that we are providing a certain quality coaching, and that there's some, you know, meaning behind being a certain accredited coach. Is this something that, you know, there's more that we could do ourselves? Is there something that the organizations need to do more?
It's a good question, Minji, because if I think about the States, it's still the wild, wild west over there. You can call yourself a life coach and have, you know, what, a degree from Coursera or, you know, for after 20 hours of watching videos. So it is a difficult, it's a difficult question to answer, I think, because as I sort of step away from it, that was part of part of the problem is, you know, you kind of sit there and say, you know, well, you say you're the term coach. I mean, that alone is like, well, you know, it's a proper term because you are coaching, as in like coaching a soccer team or a football team or whatever. But it's a different, like, I wish there was a different term for it. So these accreditations and these bodies, and, you know, it's almost asking, how do you give a coach validity? You know, how do we do that? And if you ask my expat moms that I coach, they don't care. You know, for them, they just need some help, and they need someone to listen, and they need someone to guide them. And it's much more about, I trust you, and I know that you're ethical because you've taken your course there, and that's good. Fine. Can we just work? So it is different. It's difficult to answer, I think. And I don't know if that's going to come down to, is it an overarching global thing, which I would love to think it should be, or is it that, like, life coaching has one thing, psychological coaching has another, someone who's a leadership coach does this, executive coaches have to do that? I don't know.
I think it's interesting what you said there, though, Beth. You said something really important. You said they trust you. They trust you. You're an ethical person. They trust you. And that's, I think, the competencies of both the MCC and the ICF, they talk about our presence. And that is to do with trust. And how do we evidence that? And we evidence that through our training, all the things we've all agreed on. The space of, you know, what Mindy was reflecting on there, you step into an organization and they don't really maybe understand. That's okay, because we can educate. We can. You meet you, Mindy, and you're so ethical yourself. You're trained. You understand your profession. So you will educate. But there is fantastic work being done in the world by the ICF and the MCC. I mean, truly unbelievable work. And so many universities are involved now in the whole space of coaching and mentoring. So we're in a good place. I think we're way beyond where we used to be. We're in such a great place. We are so ethical. It's the most wonderful profession. We are doing a fantastic job. And I think we should be so proud of ourselves. I really do.
And if I can add, like, one of the best tools I've used for helping people even understand what coaching is coaching. So, like, I've gone to the stage, and because again, it's looking at the marketplace, looking what's there, and listening to what clients want and need. Discovery call, chemistry call, people kind of say that, okay, it's a sales call. So I don't do that anymore. It's let's have a call. And that call I generally forecast for around about an hour, and that call is a coaching session. Because I'm a firm believer, I'm ex automobile industry, and the best way to get somebody to buy a car is drive a car, and the best way to get somebody to invest in coaching is invest in coaching.
Great point.
Great point.
Yeah. Nothing like going through it and experiencing it yourself and walking away from that conversation with, wow, okay, so this is what it's going to be like to talk to this guy every 2 to 4 weeks for an hour to 90 minutes. So sign me up. Yeah.
Well, even what you said there, Stephen, I know that this past year has been really hard for many salespeople, and that whole profession is kind of shifting to a much more coaching conversational dialogue than it used to be for certain industries. And it's really been interesting listening to some of these salespeople struggle with that active listening portion of those coaching conversations, because they really do need to ask the questions to figure out the true needs, because no longer it seems like in some of these industries that, you know, the potential customer comes with, yes, we need 40 of these products and all this. They're much more like, tell us why we need 40 of these products. And so the salespeople are having to shift and adapt. And it's kind of been a real eye-opener for some of those salespeople of just how much effort and energy it takes to really be in that active listening position and still get the information as a salesperson that you need. And it's, you know, I think it's one of those things that gives me real hope that if we're talking about salespeople trying to be better active listeners, then maybe this will seep into the rest of all the organization departments.
Yeah, I on the basis that I know I have significant bias in that area, I'm not going to cover that one.
Good ethical choice there, Stephen, to be aware of your own bias. I was thinking about what Paula was saying there a couple moments ago about, you know, all the kind of progress that's been made by bodies like the ICF, the EMCC. Last week was the EMCC conference, the annual conference, and a number of fantastic speakers there talking about some of the work that they're doing. I was really inspired walking away from that conference myself last week, hearing some of the work that folks are doing to try to bridge the gap that I think many of us kind of sense is forming out there in terms of, as I mentioned earlier, are we only kind of helping those who maybe don't really need the help as much as others? And I know, Beth, you've gotten involved recently with an organization in the States. Would you mind maybe sharing a little bit of kind of what you're doing there, and kind of fits into this space of like democratizing coaching, I think, which is a pretty common thing that a lot of coaches are talking about these days.
Yeah, it's just a little bootstrapped startup at the moment. So it's a company called Steer Us, and our ethos is well, the point of the company itself is actually to provide coaching, a coaching platform online where we can hopefully scale and deliver coaching, you know, via blended learning environment. So both with a coach and also with a technology interface. So that's what the company sort of does. But the ethos behind it and sort of the why behind it was very much that, why is it that, you know, executive coaches up in, you know, corporations can afford Jeff and Mindy and Stephen and everyone else? They can afford to have a coaching. Well, what about the kids coming out of uni? What about, you know, third world countries and all of these kids coming out, you know, in anywhere that don't have the access and can't spend, you know, 200-300 euros on a corporate leadership coach? They still need these skills. And this is really close to my heart because my whole journey to get to coaching was because I didn't have these skills coming out of uni. And I think there's a lot of students, and especially in the States, which is where this startup is being launched, that they come out and they get a real slap of reality and go, oh my God, what am I doing here? You've just gone from being in academic world your entire life, and you've got to make this shift into this new language, this new understanding, and psychological environments that are just something that you've never sort of experienced. So they call it soft skills, we call it life skills, human skills, people skills, I think is what Google calls them, people skills. Whatever it is, the idea is to bring this to as many people around the world as possible. So that mission will take a good couple of years, but that's, I think, something that, me included, kind of got me again out of the coaching bit, being like, well, how can I train then? How can I train these people on active listening and asking and learning how to ask their own questions in their own head, to be curious? And, how can we get students to maybe pause before they react and instead respond? Or how can we get them to understand that, like, time management's important, and being responsible is something that they have to actually embrace and become, take responsibility. They've got to, in a sense, grow up a little bit, but they've got to learn those skills. So yeah, thanks, Jeff, for bringing that up, because I think, as coaches, it's, is this how we give back, or, is it I'm not really sure. I think it's a personal thing as a coach, or maybe even as organizations are out there, can find a way to deliver the value and the guidance that a coach can bring to, kids coming out of uni, or just kids who don't even go to uni. I mean, that as well.
Yeah.
I love that. And I think, really, to be fair, there's fantastic work done in that space. EMCC and ICF have a lot of work done to assist people. And EMCC Ireland work with an organisation called Ashoka, which is entrepreneurs. I mean, we had Connect to Coach, which you may have heard about. So helping people in the front line, giving them support, and no fees involved with that. As a supervisor myself there, and I was blown away by the amount of warmth that coaches were prepared to give. And these are coaches who are themselves entrepreneurs and who are equally being challenged, because they're like, think about it, their own business was beginning to suffer because, they were moving into a different space, but they were giving back. So I think I do understand we're saying that maybe, yes, executives, etc., maybe offer more of an opportunity. I think we're really conscious of that, even as what Beth's saying there, we're conscious of that. And I think I know so many coaches who do pro bono work, so many. So I think we are aware of the gifts we bring and the training we have and how we can add value. And I've colleagues working in India at the moment, really supporting people there. So I think we're doing a good job.
Yeah, and I think, and you're spot on, Paula, because I think the companies that we're working with in the States, are coming forward and saying, well, can we sponsor? Okay, can we sponsor a school? Can we sponsor, a certain group? And I'm like, yeah, bring them in. Like, that's the whole point. So if it's a sponsorship or a fundraising, method to have it happen, it works for me. Whatever way to get it out.
Love it.
Yeah, I love that, Beth. And yeah, I agree. I think we all kind of seek out opportunities to give back and do pro bono work and help in our communities. But I think that technology, I think obviously I'm a bit biased at the company I've just spent so much time in, but I think technology can play an amazing role in how we do this. And, there's an expectation from the younger generation that technology is part of how they consume, and how they learn. Yeah. So it is something that we, need to embrace in some way. And things that we've kind of, I'm sure this is what your platform is geared towards, but what's that just in time kind of nudge that you need? Like, what is a methodology that might help you right in this moment, or just as you're preparing to do something? And yes, that's not, the pure intuitive coaching, and we all recognize that, but there is also a place for it. I think that's fantastic.
And you sort of hit the nail on the head there, that, these students need bite size. They need stuff straight away, quick. And for me as a coach, I said, well, hang on, they need the time to think. They need the time to reflect on what they've just learned, and they need the time to practice, to put, a technique into play. And so hence when we were developing the platform, it was like, well, hang on a second. It can't just be video,
Yeah.
or interaction or game. It has to have that coach as a human, that has to be blended, because you
Yeah.
have to be able to be there and say, just take a second. I don't need an answer straight away.
Yeah.
And I actually kind of wanted to ask about that because I met a company recently that they're a little tech startup that tries to deliver coaching through an app, essentially replacing what we would do. Obviously, I'm sure we're all a little biased about that since it pays the bills for us. But I mean, what do you all think about that? Do you see that as a feasible path forward? Like, can technology replace human intuition?
Technology has replaced, there has been some research done in this, shouldn't say replaced it, and there are apps and there are interactive technologies out there. And we had an April Fool's, I don't know if you saw it last year, where the first accredited program, because you see that, Steve. Yeah, I mean, but I think we need to embrace technology, absolutely. Most research would indicate that the human touch probably would never be replaced. Not fully, no. Most research, but there's really, really good research out there around this space and how we can use it as coaches. I think we're okay at the moment.
Yeah, there's two things that an observation I've had just in the conversation, and it ties back to what you said about actually developing the industry. A huge amount of us who are coaches who are actually focused on what we do rather than focusing on developing the message of what we do. And it's quite interesting that we'd probably spend more time and more focus on actually giving pro bono hours than actually developing the message of actually what is coaching and educating people on coaching. And it's something that I've seen in service-led industries in the past as well, that we can tend to focus on the activity rather than the message, because the activity has real results, where the message is a message. It's just an interesting observation I've had just in the conversation that was going on there, and just on the bot side of things, I think there's huge potential. I'll be very, very honest with you. I think it's phenomenal potential. At the EMCC conference there, I think last year, they had one of the supplier of coaching app and bot, and they also brought up research that, and again, it depends on the demographic, the people we're working with. I'm ex-military, so I've when I hear about military, the ears prick up. But in the US, they had a higher level of engagement with veterans with PTSD when they were engaging with the bot, because they felt the bot wasn't judging them. And there can be that space as well where the bot we can use those tools to do some of the, like Cathie said, the right time messaging, those little tips, tricks, nudges when there's a habit or positive habits to be the kind of if then logic. So if you know yourself, technology can know an awful lot about what we're doing through habits, and it's that habit tracking. And there's great opportunity for bots and for AI to hold that space when we're not in a coaching conversation, but still have that coaching development focus, that really good growth at the heart of its tool. And the flip side is there are people who are absolutely scared to death of the idea of technology in a coaching environment.
Yeah, you're spot on, Stephen. And as I was just listening to you, thinking, I think with the advent of COVID finishing here, and we're all sort of having to reemerge from our shells or reemerge from our caves, if you will, to come out back into the world. And I look at I've got 2 kids, and I look at them, and the technology is so integrated in them. Like it's part of their being. And yet we all, you've got Better Up, you have, which is, coaching and therapy. And I think what I'd like to say is that when it comes to the technology, that if it's used properly, it is so beneficial. and that it can be, there can be numerous, a bot here, maybe I don't know, a ping on the phone there. There can be, a therapist here. But actually, at the end of the day, I'm kind of hoping it's a personal development revolution or something that's going to happen here, because we've got a mental health issue that's global, and not just about mental health, but a personal development thing. It's like, I want to make myself better, whether that be through therapy because I need it, or because I want to be a better human being. I want to be a better leader. I want to be a better mom. I want to be a better soccer player, whatever it is. That if there's technology that's integrated within our lives in any aspect, I think it's just it's gonna happen whether we like it or not.
Yeah, I was just thinking about what you were mentioning a few minutes ago, Beth, with regards to steer us, and it's almost as if the education system in a lot of countries is to the point where by design it's just not teaching these fundamental human skills that people need. The self-awareness, emotional intelligence, communication skills, critical thinking.
Just being responsible is a hard
Yeah.
thing.
I'll go even back a level even more. How to cook and how to budget.
Yeah.
I'm curious because, we talked about young folks coming out of university, maybe not equipped with some of these fundamental kind of life skills. What's the impact you would have seen of that in an organization like Google? What would that have meant to, the first couple of years in the organization for people?
Yeah, I actually worked as part of an employee resource group focused on women in the workplace, and we had a chapter in Dublin. And one of the things that I often came across in early career women at Google was just the lack of confidence, across so many different areas. But I definitely keep going back to the fact, I think, Stephen, you were just talking about it, is that we don't develop these types of skills in school. And perhaps it's not the responsibility of schools, but,
No.
There's maybe an element that sits within the school, then we support that at home. But it's certainly something that I saw just take over women in the workplace, really kind of limit their growth or opportunities that they were prepared to put themselves forward for. Huge issues with imposter syndrome. Mindy and I have talked about this before. All of that stuff that I'm sure you've all kind of encountered. And I'm always brought back to, the early intervention. And actually, when we were talking about the pro bono work before, I was just talking to an organization yesterday who go into schools and do some group coaching around the areas of confidence, how to set goals, how to take small steps towards achieving your goals, that kind of stuff. I just think it's incredibly important to intervene early, or at least kind of open them up to these conversations. And Stephen, as you said, like, support at home is incredibly important there.
We just, you're spot on, Cathie. We just did, Steris just filled out an RFP for, I think it was the state of Rhode Island. And, these, at least in the states, the states themselves, certain states have seen what coaching can do for them. And they put out a request to say, we need coaches for our principals, and then we need coaches for our teachers, and then we'd like to have some coaches for our staff, not the kids, but for those three, because they know that once it gets delivered there, that hopefully it can trickle down into the kids, or at least, if there could be some education there, but even just to help them to be able to handle, students, and, whether they're looking for, that Band-Aid or that plaster to put over something that's really, probably, I don't know, systemic, that's a bit, bigger than this.
Yeah.
The fact is that they are looking and they're asking and they're saying, please, someone, can you just come in and help?
Yeah.
Really. Paul, I was kind of curious, we're obviously talking about education here, and you're one of the people that educated us as coaches. So like, how do you even see kind of what's happening around us influencing how you might have to approach building the next generation of coaches? Is that having a big influence on, shaping your curricula or your approaches or anything like that?
First of all, I really want to say the conversation on women in leadership is a really interesting one. The fact we still only have 25 women in the Fortune 500 is saying something. But then the paradox is a lot of women are making decisions based on their values also, and stepping off. So there's, I think we can hear that in the room. So it is an interesting conversation. Definitely start all over again. And with regards to coaching and coach training, the one thing it's important to me to say this, the coaching profession is a fabulous profession. We're doing fantastic work. People are being trained. You can hear it here in the platform. We've all gone through training. We understand what coaching is. So from my own perspective, and I am involved obviously in delivering coach training, we're doing a really good job. We need to continue doing that job and building our strengths. We need to continue looking at the space of even areas like regulation. I'm not hung up on it, but I recognize it's an important space. It is happening. The dialogue is happening. So I think I'm often asked, well, who should I join? What will I do? Will I join? And if I join ICF to say, what did it do for me? And I always say to them, that's the wrong question. What can you do for our profession? And we're all listening to this. This is fantastic forum to be on. I'm humbled. You're doing fantastic work. And I think you reflect the coaching industry. This is a reflection of our industry, all of you here, because this is what you experience when you meet coaches.
I think it's an important discussion point, as Paula said, that we're, as coaches, we encourage our clients and the people we work with to go back to their own values, and in that process of questioning what your own values are, you learn so much about yourself, and it really can help shape your idea of what success for yourself is. And I think this past year has kind of accelerated the opportunity, but maybe you've been thrown into the landscape now that you need to look at your values, and you are finding different passions than you may have expected before. So I do think that there's a big shift in many different ways. It's like more of a splintering than just one massive shift, but of people all across, the world having these kind of introspection points and figuring out that what they have been doing isn't really making them feel successful. And so it will be interesting, I think, and I'd love to hear your points of view of how that may reflect in what our leadership profile in the future looks like.
This obviously resonates with me quite a lot at the moment because I've gone through this journey myself. And, as a coach, I absolutely would encourage a lot of work around values and the prioritization of those values and where you're at in your life right now, and have those priorities or the order of those values and priorities shifted. And I really love what you said there about the definition of success, Mindy. I think it's so important, and the acknowledgement that can change. So, a lot of women that I've spoken to over the last while are re-entering the workforce, and that might be after a significant career break for a number of reasons. And with that comes a lot of challenges just for the individual, right? And for the organization, recognizing that this is an untapped resource. Bringing people back into the workforce is a fantastic thing, and being ready to support them in the ways that they need it. Coaching can play a really important role there. And I think some focused attention in that area will pay dividends in terms of like what leadership might look like in the future.
I completely agree. I worked 20 years in corporate America in marketing, and I was doing the thing. I was living in all these different countries, traveling the world, and I was in Sydney and Singapore, and I was all over the place, and it was fantastic until I got pregnant. And then I had my first son, who's just my first child, my son, he's gorgeous. But I fell down a horrendous suicidal of postnatal depression. And it was there that it took me a year and a half to get out of it. I had group counseling, I had regular counseling and full on therapy. But it was in that therapy that I learned what values were. I learned what, who I was, because I had been pushing to something that I thought I wanted. And I was going through this, life of, I'm supposed to have this next. I'm supposed to have this next. I'm supposed to do this next. And, when you're confronted with a child, and even, the husbands all out there know, that it just knocked me completely over. And I'm so thankful for it, because it was the best thing that ever happened to me. And it was the pivot for me to go and say, I need to go understand what happened in my brain. I have to understand, what does depression look like? But actually what it did was it led me towards finding my authentic self. And I think if we can find a way, and again, this comes back to the kids coming out of uni. I never learned any of this stuff. So if we can find a way to get into people before they hit a depression, before they hit any kind of suicidal thoughts, before they go anywhere there, success, massive success. And you don't have to be a therapist to do that. So I think, coaching can play a huge role there. And so coming back to the concept of women in leaders and women leaders, I think if we coach early, then we've got those women who can decide, do I want to be that leader up there? How does my path look? What do I want to create? What sits authentically with myself and with me and what I want to do.
Thanks for sharing that, Beth. Appreciate you bringing something that personal to the table. It really resonated with me though too, because I feel like, my own transformation of a sense, I think began with working with a coach, 13, 14 years into my time at Amazon. And I was lucky enough to be part of a leadership program that paired me up with an executive coach. And I remember the first 2 hours I spent with her, I didn't feel like we talked about anything that had anything to do with my job, but oh my God, did it like change my whole perspective. And the 3 or 4 meetings I had with her after that, that was what really revealed to me, like, this is kind of the path I need to go down. And it was transformational. And it was kind of, I wouldn't go so far as to say it was life-saving for me, but I was definitely on that path that you've described of like, you think you're working towards something that you really want, and you realize, actually, this isn't really what I want at all. And that was an amazing experience. I wonder though, does that sometimes scare companies from engaging with coaches? Because I left my employer a couple of years after. I've certainly coached a handful of people who have gotten to the end of their engagement with me as well, and they've realized, you know what, actually, I'm not doing what I want to do, and I'm going to take a big pivot here. And I wonder, does that present an obstacle sometimes in corporate engagements for any of you?
I think it scares companies that are threat-minded.
Yeah.
Like the company I used to work with and the department I used to run, like one of the focus I would have is that, because it was quite a tough environment, quite intense, is when the guys were coming in, particularly technicians were coming into the support role, I'd say, look, I'm expecting you for about 5 years. After 3 years, we'll be having a chat to see what we can do to actually progress your career within the company as well. And there were some lads and some of the technicians that their progression was outside the company, but I developed them in, because again I'm focused on them, because it's what's best for them. And I think it's, as you were talking there, and as Cathie was talking about the program, we're talking about women in leadership. Like one of the real opportunities I think a lot of companies have, and some are taking it on board, and some of the larger ones, is on the onboarding stage. Is when people are coming onto the company, in the same way when you're leaving a company, there could be a retirement program. Well, they have a good onboarding program, and it's not just a structured read the manual and make sure you tick all the boxes. It involves a fairly comprehensive induction, which involves that it may not have a coach, but it may have a manager who's actually qualified or trained in a coaching methodology, as Beth had said earlier on. I think that's really, really important, because it's at that stage where those conversations are allowed to happen, but also it brings those conversations into the company as well. And I think there's a nice balance to be had there, because I and you guys would know as well, like having been the manager, have those roles, you want to see your people do well for themselves and achieve what they can achieve. And that's leadership. And that's the people that we want to develop. And at the same time, there's also managers who don't want them to go because they're performing well. And that can be a bit of a mindset that holds people back. And it's kind of cracking that nut of how do we make sure that we've got real leaders in positions that have real impact. And that's not necessarily at the top. That could be actually mid-level.
I'm certainly seeing that desire for managers or leaders to be able to bring a coaching approach to how they show up at work as being a big trend in terms of, I think, well, and I suppose there is probably a divide between, maybe some of fixed mindset organizations, growth mindset organizations, and do you really, because it's a fantastic way to drive engagement and empowerment with people, to really unlock their own potential, get them really engaged around what they want to be doing.
I think the pandemic has been really interesting because I know I've seen, let's call it manager mindset, people really struggle. And I've seen leadership mindset people really flourish.
Yeah.
And the great conversations coming out of it as well is that as people involved in developing businesses, one thing we really have to focus on now and give it a lot of really positive attention is making sure that the opportunity for women to be leaders in business aren't disenfranchised because of the pandemic, because it's been bloody tough.
Cathie, did you see similar kinds of trends in terms of what Google's looking for in terms of their own leaders? I'm certainly familiar with the work that they did around Project Aristotle and, sort of asserting that the thing that made the best teams were those teams that had a high level of psychological safety. And obviously that's one of the things that, really great leaders and coaches are able to do. Is that is that a really strong vibe that runs through the organization if you're getting into a role like that?
Yeah, it's huge. And actually all of that research, internal research that you're referring to there, was a lot of the bedrock of what the OD consultancy team would have used. So the expectation that leaders know how to build effective teams, that they are coaching their teams, that they're developing their teams, they're not developing their leaders, their future leaders for Google, they're developing them for the world. And that can sound a little arrogant, but it's back to what you said there, Stephen. It's, you're not holding on to them because they're high performers. You're developing them into the best leaders that they can possibly be. That very much is the vibe. And, some people with the growth mindset completely embrace that. And it just takes others longer to get there. But that absolutely is what flows through the company. And we do great in some areas, not so good in others. Kind of newer teams take longer to get there. Really, how to bring the cultures together, and how do we take what's great in both and capitalize on that. But certainly, a trend that I've seen over the last couple of years is around managers in particular seeking out further development in coaching. So there are internal programs that will give them, the foundations and kind of set the expectations of what you need to do as part of your job. But there's been a huge desire to go deeper and to get externally qualified, which is absolutely fantastic to see. And I would say that really has accelerated in the last 2 to 3 years.
Paula, would you see other organizations as well coming to a place like Kingstown to actually look for support in developing programs internally to bring this into their own organization?
I love what Cathie's saying. I mean, years ago, we went in as the experts, the external coach panels. We went in and we were the experts. Organizations more and more now are training their internal coaches, and their internal coaches are as well trained. They understand the coaching profession. They bring that gift. But going back to what Cathie said, there is also a huge shift to developing managers in coaching dialogue. Huge shift, assisting leaders to engage in a whole different way with their direct reports, for sure. And the biggest growth, actually, from my own perspective, besides mental health, Beth, I totally agree with you, hopefully to continue, is team coaching. Huge amount of work. I'm lecturing myself on what's called a Global Team Coaching Institute, but the whole space of team coaching, working within the system as opposed to taking one person, working with the system is one of the biggest trends I've seen, actually. I don't know if you'd agree, Cathie. That's
Yeah.
one. Yeah.
Well, and that's such a really great point too, Paula, I think, because it you know, we have a little bit of a tendency, I think, as humans sometimes to think about we can just do something in isolation and think we're going to fix a problem and not realize the ripple effects that kind of cascade out from that. So that notion of kind of working on the whole system, I think, is a really important aspect, because otherwise you're kind of just, aren't you just addressing symptoms? You're just kind of like your paracetamol as opposed to like chemotherapy.
And if we can share what a great tool I've used in that, and it's been actually great fun developing as well, is Lego Serious Play.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Because it just allows people to talk without really considering the armor they need to put around that talk. It's a fantastic, absolutely fantastic, particularly on a team perspective, but it's a fantastic tool to use.
I just gave a presentation actually to a bunch of students at TU Dublin, and they were just being diverted into two teams, and we used the positive psychology character strengths, the VIA survey, and just to make them aware. And we went through a couple role plays and just delivering that information to them. Now they have the language in their team to be able to work with things, and it's amazing because, you know, working with even one of the students there said, well, what happens when I expect so-and-so to be a leader, since that's the top leadership skill? And I said, well, that's because you just said expect. Who expects what? Who expects what? And she was literally thrown off her seat for a minute there, because it was, oh, like, it couldn't be me. It, you know, must be somebody else. And it is that process of just asking, you know, throwing back that question on character strengths, which are positive. So, you know, I think I love the team environment thing. I'm glad to hear that, Paula, that's kind of all coming with team coaching and everything. That to me is very exciting.
Yeah. Something that I experienced in the last couple of years was the opportunity to partner with external coaches and consultants. So you've got the best of both worlds. So you've your internal person who's bringing the cultural kind of importance, some of the historical aspects, and I'm talking about team coaching here really, but and then you've got the fresh perspective of the external coach or consultant. And, you know, to start with, that can be quite intimidating, because you're like, you know, this is my job, what are you doing here, kind of thing. But you know, a quick reframe, and you know, the opportunity just to partner with someone with a completely different perspective and to learn from each other, I thoroughly enjoyed over the last couple of years. And it also helped me to imagine what I might look like once I step out. So that was actually very, very powerful for me too. But on the team coaching front, that is something over, I'd say, the last 2 or 3 years has really come to the fore at Google. Really thinking about the system that you're operating in. What is the role that you play on this team? How does that kind of impact everything that's going on around you?
That's an interesting point you raised there, Cathie, about having an objective third party come in, because, you know, sometimes obviously if you're not part of the system, there are things that you can see or sense about it that someone who's inside of it might not see. Have any of you actually seen that be a challenge to internal team coaching effectiveness, that you're too close to the system, you're too much a part of it, that sometimes could be a barrier to an even more effective engagement?
I think that's getting caught in that trap, and as Paula would say from time to time, listening to the story that's being told.
Yeah.
As an internal coach as well, I suppose, and a consultant, there's something refreshing about a third party coming in and being able to say things in a way that you possibly can't. So it's not that you can't see it, but there is a little bit of, you know, you're dancing around it slightly.
Yeah,
You know, you shouldn't have to, but there definitely is that kind of element to it. And depending on what the engagement is, it absolutely makes sense to bring somebody else in who can play that critical role.
that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, having, you know, that challenger position in any kind of group engagement, whether it's team coaching or even just a team kind of building, like it's good to have someone challenging the status quo, the system. Are we really evolving, or are we just doing the same thing? And it can be difficult once you're in a system to play that challenger role. And one of the things as a coach, it's you know, kind of part of your role to challenge everything. But when, as an internal coach, I can understand, Cathie, that there still might be some limitations there, or perhaps even confidence issues to play that challenger.
Yeah.
Definitely.
Yeah.
Probably beyond confidence, even into like job safety and security and really desperate situations.
The contracting is key, right? But I mean, still, the leader in question needs to be ready for it, and really ready for it, you know.
Yeah.
Sometimes it's okay to be a pushy American, huh?
You work with what you got, right?
I've probably been paid to be that a couple of times. So, yeah.
I use that to my advantage. I'll say, right, here's a stereotype and a bias for you. I am one of those pushy Americans. If you don't want someone who's going to come in here and challenge you and be pushy, then I'm not your one.
And I've used a flip of that where I've on some international engagements, I've said, I'm going to play the Irishman.
Yeah.
I'm going to keep on asking until I know everything about you. It's a great one to use as well.
Well, folks, I'm realizing we're kind of near the end of our time together today, but I just maybe wanted to hear from all of you kind of one last time. I suppose we've obviously, as we kind of planned, we had a bit of a meandering discussion around this topic, touched on a lot of different things: education, parenting, coaching inside, outside. If there were one thing that those who might be watching today were to take away with them about coaching or about getting involved with coaching or whatever it might be, what would you hope it would be?
I think, Jeff, as human beings, we all want to live a life of meaning that's giving us meaning and purpose. We all want that, and I think coaching brings that perspective. We allow you were talking earlier, reflecting on people leaving organizations, but that's a good thing. The quality of our decisions directly relates to the quality of our lives. So coaching brings that perspective, that holding a person in unconditional positive regard and allowing them to grow into wherever they want to grow into. But we do challenge. And I think that coaching as a profession brings such gifts. I really do, genuinely. Obviously, I'm very prejudiced. I do appreciate that, but I've seen amazing change in people's lives through engaging in coaching. So I think for me, in this dialogue, which I've really genuinely enjoyed, the big message I would say around coaching is around the biographical conversation. Of course, we want to hear what's happened. Of course we do. But it's about being here and now, exactly as you said, Bill. It's about being the here and now, and then feeding forward all the great learnings that we have and building on our strengths. So coaching by its very nature is strengths-based, which is a fantastic way for us as human beings to live our lives, I think, personally.
Thanks, Paula.
Yeah, I love that.
That was beautiful. Anyone else?
How can you top that?
I know. I knew she was going first. I was like, oh man, see, the rest of you are gonna be rough. You're gonna do great though. We got faith.
Participation medals all around.
Well,
the Americans are running the call, so yeah, everybody gets a trophy.
I suppose I'll just keep it nice and short. Try it. Look at it like a fantastic meal. Like you can look at a fantastic meal and say, oh, that's a fantastic meal, but you won't actually know until you try it. So if you're looking at coaching, if you're thinking about it, if it's something that's coming across your radar, try it. Then you'll know.
Yeah.
Good point. You never know if you don't try.
Yeah, I'd echo that, Stephen, because I think it's a journey. I think even as us coaches are taking or guiding or working with others as they go on a journey, we as coaches, and becoming a coach or not becoming a coach or coming in and coming out is a journey. And so I think being able, if you're interested in this field, is to go on a journey and explore.
Life is a big exploration journey. Yes, indeed. Cathie, anything from you?
I mean, I would just say it's good to talk, and even if it's not with a coach, you know, if you're facing something or challenged with something, reach out to someone you trust to listen and without judgment.
Beautiful.
I just wanted to say thank you. I love all of those points. And I think that you're right. Like, coaching is so experiential, and it really is about that relationship of being able to talk and challenge yourself with someone that you trust and who is asking questions without judgment. So it's all about compassion. And I think coaching kind of just embraces that way of looking at life through compassion and understanding and loving the fact that we're all human and no one is perfect, and all those imperfections make us amazing people. So that would be my takeaway.
Cool. Well, before we wrap up, we usually like to let our viewers know where, if they want to learn a little bit more about you or what you do, where they could go. Paula, if anyone was interested in the work that you do, how would you suggest that they get in contact with you?
Well, Kingstown College, which is KINGSTOWN, Kingstown College, you'll always get me. Yeah, for sure. And I love to hear from everybody. Contact me.
Thanks, Paula. So glad you were able to join us today.
Yes.
Beth, how about you?
Yeah, I mean, you can get me at my website at bethelee.com or at themindinstitute.ie.
Brilliant. Thank you, Beth. Cathie, how about you?
So it's early days, but you can find me on my LinkedIn profile. So just Cathie Owens Coaching.
Excellent. And Mr. McDonald?
Yeah, I don't do drive-through, but you can get me on timesworth.ie is the best way, and I'm across social media as well. I enjoy LinkedIn and Twitter.
He doesn't do drive-through, but he does do Uber Eats and delivery. So
yet there's a model there that might work in time. Like they've done it for weddings, they've done it for inoculations. Why not coaching?
Well, we just want to thank you all again for taking a bit of time out of your Friday afternoon to join us for this conversation. It was a real pleasure to take a meandering path through this topic with all of you today.
Yes,
thank you so much for your time, for your commitment, and we'll wish you all a fantastic weekend. Thanks again for joining us.
Nice guys, great session.
Thank you,
really
guys.
good talk.
Bye.
Thank you so much.